Hey everyone! So I've just gotten multiple questions from today's lesson on equivalent expressions, particularly this problem, the one about Priya's garden. So I just wanted to make a little bit more of an in-depth video for all of you people who were struggling with this problem and just feel like you need a little bit of extra guidance. So this is a word problem, so we need to take a close look at everything that's in play here. So if we were to annotate this, you can see 2/5, so that's a number. It's written as a word, but that is a number. 2/5 of the vegetables in Priya's garden are tomatoes. All right? And then the question is down below. How many tomatoes are there if Priya's garden has 20 vegetables? So, in order to solve this problem, we need to make an equation. Okay? So, the only number that is given to us originally, before we look at the question, just if we look at the word problem, is 2/5. Okay? 2/5. And it says 2/5 of the vegetables. So at this point, it is not giving us any number for the vegetables. But the vegetables play a really big part, right? We're talking about 2/5 of them. So if we don't have a number for the vegetables yet, anytime there's an unknown number or an unknown value, that's when we put a variable. So a really easy variable for vegetable would probably be something like V. Okay? And so one thing that we need to know, so anytime you want to find a fraction of a number, or a percent of a number, or a decimal value of a number, that is always multiplication. So let's say I asked you what 1/2 of 8 is. You would do 1/2 times 8. And you would get 8 over 2, and then you would get 4 is 1/2 of 8. Let's say you wanted to know what 3/4 of 8 is. Then you would multiply 3/4 times 8, and you would get 24 over 4. And remember, fractions are division, so 24 over 4 is 6. So 3/4 of 8 is 6. So anytime you want to find a fraction of a number, you multiply that fraction times that number. So 2/5 of the vegetables, I'm going to do 2/5 of V. And once again, this is an example of next to notation. And next to notation is just when you have a number written next to a variable with no operation symbol that represents multiplication. Okay, so 2/5 of the vegetables, or 2/5 times the vegetables, are tomatoes. So that will equal the tomatoes. So if I wanted to find 2/5 of the vegetables, I would do 2/5 times however many vegetables there were, and that would give me the amount of tomatoes in the garden. So now at this point, we're going to be ready to solve number 1. So 2/5 of 20 vegetables, because it's saying how many tomatoes are there if Priya's garden has 20 vegetables. So now I'm being given a value for my variable. All right, they're saying the number of vegetables equals 20. And I'll write this over to the side, a little key that V stands for vegetables and T stands for tomatoes. It's always a good idea to have a little key off to the side. So they're telling me that there's going to be 20 vegetables in this case. So if that was the case, how many tomatoes are there? Anytime you are given a value for a quantity, you need to substitute in. So substitution is the idea of replacing a variable, the letter, with a value. So 2/5 of the vegetables, well, there's 20 vegetables, so 2/5 of 20 will tell me how many tomatoes there are. All right? And so once again, if you ever want to multiply a fraction times a whole number, remember that any whole number could just be written over 1. Right? So 20 and 20 over 1 are the same thing, and then you simply just multiply across. That would be 40 over 5. And to simplify that, fractions are division, and 5 goes into 40 evenly 8 times. So I would get 8 equals t as my solution. However, it is a word problem, so you should write your answer as a complete sentence. So 8 is t, and t is tomatoes. So how many tomatoes are there if Priya's garden has 20 vegetables? So to write a really complete answer, if Priya's garden had 20 veggies, 8 of them would be tomatoes. Okay. And now, so then here is the work that I had before. And then so if there were X vegetables, so for that problem now, it's the same idea as before, but they're not giving us a number. It just says X vegetables. So we could just replace this V we used before and say 2/5 of X vegetables is my tomatoes. And you actually cannot solve this problem because they never gave us a number for the vegetables. So the answer would literally be simply, there would be 2/5 X tomatoes. We can't actually solve this one because in this one they told us there were 20 veggies. So we could substitute that in for the vegetable. Here they just were replacing the variable with another variable with no number. So this problem was really just more so trying to get you to write that equation down again. So you can't actually solve this one if they don't give you an actual value for your variable. You're just kind of left with this expression, okay, 2/5 X. And then the final problem here is if Priya's garden has 6 tomatoes, how many vegetables are there? So we're still using the same equation, 2/5 of her vegetables will equal her amount of tomatoes, but in this problem, they're not telling us how many vegetables there are, they're telling us how many tomatoes there are. And they're saying that there are 6 of them. Okay? So once again, we're given a value for a variable. We need to substitute that in. However, in the last problem, we substituted in for V because we were told how many veggies there were. But in this one, we were actually told how many tomatoes there were. So we need to substitute in that way. All right, so this is going to be our new equation. So 2/5 of how many vegetables is 6. Okay, so here I'm trying to find out how many vegetables there are if Priya had 6 tomatoes. So in order to solve this situation, as always when we work with variables, we can always use inverse operations. In order to do inverse operations, though, we need to know what operation's happening here at all. There's no operation sign. So then that must mean this is a next to notation problem, which means it's multiplication. If there's no symbol in between a number and a variable, they're just attached together, that's just another way of representing multiplication. So this is 2/5 times V equals 6. So now, if we are doing multiplication and we're missing one of our factors, we're missing this times this equals this, but we're missing one of the factors, then we do the inverse or opposite operation to solve. So the opposite of multiplication is division. You always divide by the coefficient, right? You always divide by the coefficient. That's a really important vocab term, and the coefficient is the number attached to a variable. So here we're going to divide by 2/5. 2/5 divided by 2/5 is just 1. So just 1V. But 6 divided by 2/5. That's kind of a weird way to solve it written vertically like that. Like a fraction with a fraction on the bottom. I'm going to rewrite that horizontally like this. And at this point, you should be thinking back to when we did our unit over dividing fractions. Okay? So when you divide by fractions, that's where the old keep, change, flip comes into play. Okay, so you keep that first number, the division becomes its inverse, and the fraction, the second number, gets flipped and becomes its reciprocal. Okay, because remember, multiplication is the opposite of division, so if we make multiplication its opposite, and then we take this fraction and make this the opposite, these are two equivalent expressions. They actually mean the same thing. Because we change this, we change the operation, and we change the fraction, this will get us the same work. This is just a lot easier to work with. 6 times 5 is 30 over 2. Remember, any whole number can just be over 1, and we multiply across. And 30 over 2 is 15. So that would mean V equals 15. So that would mean in this situation, Priya would have 15 veggies if she had 6 tomatoes. I hope that helps. Broke it down as much as I could. If you need anything else, remember my office hours are from 10 to noon, Monday through Thursday. Also available by phone until 4 p.m., so please feel free to give me a shout. Otherwise, good luck. Make sure you're submitting your work, especially the practice problems and exit tickets. I look forward to going over all that and giving you guys feedback. Talk soon.